Radio Free Mormon here, broadcasting behind enemy lines. Tonight is episode 445, Hyasmus Destroyed. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Radio Free Mormon. As I said, this is episode 445. The title is Hyasmus Destroyed. My very special guest tonight is Dr. Randall Bell. Share with us some interesting, fascinating, and even ground-shifting new research he's been doing into the Book of Mormon via the Dartmouth connection with Hyrum Smith. And without too much further ado, I'll bring Dr. Bell onto the stage. Here he is. Dr. Bell, how are you this morning?
The RFM, I'm doing great. How are you?
I've got the music going in case the caffeine isn't doing the trick. You look like you are ready to go. We've got some great information today. I'm so excited. By the way, I mentioned this on last night's show, the Mormonism After Dark show. I am flattered. I'm honored that you have chosen here to present this research for the first time, is my understanding, publicly.
It is the very first time this has come out in public. I personally think it's ground shaking. People can make up their own minds, but yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. What I found out at Dartmouth.
Well, great. Now, here is the slide that we have to start it. It says Book of Mormon. It's got a cover of the Book of Mormon with some defacing to the cover, including bullet holes and apparently bomb explosions. And then there's sort of a rifle scope on it. And then it says the Book of Mormon, Chiasmus Destroyed. Can you tell us a little bit about chiasmus and what it is that it means to the Book of Mormon?
Well, chiasmus is a big deal. Chiasmus is an ancient writing system that we're going to talk about explicitly, but in a big picture kind of way. It's kind of a poetic way where you make a string of statements that kind of build on each other. Then you make your main key point, and then you reverse what you just said in reverse order. And to see it diagrammed is quite impressive. And John Welsh discovered, maybe you remember, I have a slide on it, but he discovered, I think in the 1980s, the chiasmus.
He was on his mission to Germany, actually. He just come back from a lecture. Can you imagine being a missionary and attending a lecture on biblical and academic studies? And the lecturer was talking about the presence of chiasmus in the Bible.
Yeah.
The next morning, John Welch, as a missionary, discovered it in the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, and John Welsh is not a dumb guy. He went to Yale Law School, and he's now, as I understand, he's now a professor at the BYU's law school. And he issued quite a bold challenge that when I was a true believing member, I took very seriously because, how on earth could this uneducated farm boy create this poetic chiasmus structure throughout the Book of Mormon? And frankly, that always was quite compelling and baffling to me. And I took the argument hook, line, and sinker. And I think I'm certainly not the only one. A lot of people did, and a lot of people still do. They still mention it today with Mormon Apologetics. It's about to be blown out of the water because I think I figured out exactly how Joseph Smith did it and where he got the idea and even the training to do it.
Great. What are the first set of slides we'll be looking at today, Randy?
Well, the first thing I always like to say on all podcasts is don't believe a word I say, research what I say. This is something you will never hear in general conference, guaranteed. They will say research is not the answer.
The president of the church is on record as actually saying he does not recommend research.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that is baffling because I think research is the answer. Always get both sides of an argument. And so with that, I want to first do a quick overview of Dartmouth. You and I did an episode on my first round of research out of Dartmouth, which I got a lot of feedback. I got a lot of apologetics, criticizing what I said, of which frankly I want to address because I frankly think they're quite desperate in their trying to rebut it. But the The thing about Mormonism is it's divided into eras of time. And the Dartmouth research really came out of Richard Behrens' research, who was a faithful member of the church. And what these critics of what I'm saying don't seem to get is these are not my opinions. I'm simply restating what faithful members of the church have said in peer-reviewed, published research. They just don't like it and they bury it. But we oftentimes in the church think of Mormonism starting out in Palmyra, New York. That's just false. Mormonism really started in Dartmouth. The Smith family was born here. Here's the statue at the Joseph Smith home site where he was born in Upper Vermont, which was about 25 miles from Dartmouth. But the family moved right into the neighborhood of Dartmouth and lived there for a number of years. And there's quite a major connection there. So in my mind, the first ground shifting thing, which is something that really belongs to Behrens, certainly not me, is that the ideas for Mormon theology came out of Dartmouth. And I want to very quickly, we've already done an episode on this, but I just want to quickly review it and get everybody up to speed a little bit on the basics of that. The next slide is talk about the dominant narrative. And the dominant narrative is that Joseph Smith says that the Book of Mormon is the cornerstone of our religion. I mean, this is right in the introduction to the Book of Mormon. And he says that the Book of Mormon was the most correct of any book on earth and the keystone of our religion. And if you believe Joseph Smith and you believe the Book of Mormon, then you got to believe that the Book of Mormon is what he says, the keystone of the religion. And the keystone, of course, is a reference to the Roman architectural feature of an arch, and the keystone holds the whole thing together. And what the Mormon apologists like to say, and this is Dan Peterson from BYU, is, do you mind just reading this quote, RFM?
No, I've just got to say that Daniel Peterson looks delightfully evil in this picture. This is my favorite picture of him. The only thing that's missing is the horns.
I looked for the most flattering picture.
Good job. You got it. So here it is. Daniel Peterson, PhD, BYU professor, and the godfather of Mormon apologetics. The intricate structure and detailed complexity of the Book of Mormon seem far better explained as the work of several ancient writers using various written sources over the space of centuries than exploding suddenly from the mind of a barely educated manual laborer on the American frontier. So he takes several whacks at trying to downgrade Joseph Smith's intelligence.
Oh, absolutely. And well, I've underlined virtually every statement here is problematic. But, where he talks about sources over spaces of centuries, well, the problem is those don't align, with archaeology. They don't align with DNA. So, yes, there are stories spanning centuries, but as far as it actually taking place, there's a problem with that. But then getting back to Joseph Smith and the Dartmouth era, he talks about this information exploding suddenly. I'm going to demonstrate how it exploded suddenly over 5 to 17 years.
Not the Book of Mormon?
Yeah, the Book of Mormon. And from the mind of a barely educated manual laborer. Well, that is technically true. And Mormons love to kind of intermix some facts with the fiction. He was barely educated. That's true. He went to some grammar school, but he was tutored by Hiram Smith, who had for the time, a very advanced education. I mean, very advanced. And we'll get into that on the American frontier. This idea that Joseph Smith grew up on the American frontier is just utter nonsense. They lived from 1811 to 1817 in Dartmouth. which was an epicenter. It's not the singular epicenter, but it was an epicenter of intellectual thought. And we'll get into that connection. And then we'll talk further in the future about when they left Dartmouth, they went to Palmyra, New York. That is not the sticks. That is not the American frontier. It was 1 mile. The Smith home is 1 mile away from the Erie Canal, which the Mormon Church barely brings up. And the fact is, that was the information highway. I mean, that was, if you were near the Erie Canal, you had all the latest information literally coming by your front door with more explosive information. So this notion that they were out in the frontier in the wild, wild west is this factually, geographically wrong.
Okay, very good. And so this goes into the Joseph Smith history.
Yeah, do you mind reading this?
Sure. This is Joseph Smith's own words. I was born in the year of our Lord, 1805, 23rd day of December, town of Sharon, Windsor County, state of Vermont. My father, Joseph Smith Sr., left the state of Vermont and moved to Palmyra, Ontario, now Wayne County, in the state of New York, when I was in my 10th year or thereabouts. In about 4 years after my father's arrival in Palmyra, he moved with his family into Manchester in the same county of Ontario. So Joseph Smith is about 10 when they move.
Yeah. And they moved excuse me. I think he was, Joseph Smith was born in 1805. So he's about 6 when they moved. And he was about 12 or so when they moved out to Palmyra.
Oh, he was about 6 when they moved next to Dartmouth. Yes,
that's right. He was kind of born in the sticks, 25 miles away from Dartmouth, but then they moved, right in the neighborhood. Okay, so here's the Dartmouth period we're talking about from 1811 to 1817. And Hiram Smith, just for a point of reference, is born in 1800. Joseph Smith is born in 1805. So obviously they were reasonably close together, both in age and in terms of, obviously spent a lot of time together. So the next slide shows that this is the source of my information. When critics are critical, I don't take it personally, even though they attack me personally and they call me a liar personally and all that nonsense.
They call you a liar?
Oh, many times. We'll get into that. It's kind of fun. Yeah. But Richard Behrens, I'm simply quoting Richard Behrens. Richard Behrens is an interesting guy, and unfortunately he passed away, but he attended Dartmouth, and he was also a faithful member of the church, and his Dartmouth dissertation was on Hiram Smith and attending Dartmouth. So what he did was extensively research, obviously within the libraries and historical archives at Dartmouth, and it passed muster with the Dartmouth dissertation committees. This is not lightweight research that Behrens did. I'm simply quoting from him. So when they're critical,
not like somebody who just had an article published in the Interpreter.
Yeah,
this is actually, first off, it was published, at least in a different form, as a dissertation at Dartmouth.
Well, some of his related research was published, or it was turned in as a dissertation at Dartmouth. Yes,
and peer reviewed by professors at Dartmouth and given the thumbs up and passed on by them.
Yeah. And they like to they never mention this. I've become the villain because I'm simply repeating it. But don't shoot the messenger. If there's criticisms, direct them at a faithful researcher, member of the church, faithful member of the church, and the Dartmouth professors that approved his dissertation and his research, and at the peer-reviewed journal where this appeared, not me.
And let me go ahead and state for the record, that's the John Whitmer Historical Association Journal, volume 26, pages 166 through 184. It's an article published in 2006 titled Dartmouth Arminianism and Its Impact on Hiram Smith and the Smith Family, You see, you can tell why it is I come up with different kinds of titles, not so dry. Titles like Hyasmus Destroyed.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know that branding was his forte, but it certainly is yours.
It appeals to the academics, I'm sure.
Yeah. So continuing on with our quick review, this is Dartmouth campus in 1803. So this is before what it looked like before the Smith family only showed up. And the gentleman in the bottom right is Professor John Smith. He's reported by some, the only published literature out there, which is from Behrens, states that he was a distant relative of the Smiths. To be clear, Hiram and Joseph never met him because he passed away before he was before they arrived, unfortunately, a couple years before. But he was Dartmouth's first professor. And I seem to recall there was references, the reason why Hiram Smith was admitted into Dartmouth's Moor Academy. We'll talk more about what that is because of this relationship. I don't know if that's true or not, but he was the prominent figure at Dartmouth, and he also was the pastor of the Church of Christ, which frankly Joseph Smith lifted and called the first version of the Mormon Church the Church of Christ, which is the exact same name as the Christian church right across the street from Dartmouth Hall in Vermont. So, and then what Professor Smith did is he wrote essentially a book, and his intention, as I understand, was to publish the book, but unfortunately he died. And what Richard Behrens found, which was stunningly brilliant in my mind, is he found this transcript, and he found numerous correlations between what Professor John Smith talked about and what later became distinct LDS theologies. And things like polygamy, post-New Testament scripture, post-New Testament prophets, the celestial kingdom, the pre-existence, all these concepts were in the Dartmouth community curriculum, and they were developed by Dr. John Smith. And here's the evidence for it. So what I did is I got a hold of the manuscripts, I had them transcribed, and I've been working through those transcripts. Now, this is Dartmouth Hall, and this structure, which is still iconic to this day, this is a recent picture. This structure and other structures, which I'll show you in a second, were all there when the Smith family arrived in the Dartmouth area.
It must have been very impressive.
It's stunning. It's gorgeous. And if you're into architecture,
especially back then.
Back then it would have been surreal. And frankly, this is all subjective opinion, but it still is, particularly when you consider when it was built right after the Revolution. I mean, this is very distinctive, gorgeous architecture. Hiram Smith went to school here. Now, he went to what we today we'd probably refer to as an academy, a prep school. And right across the street from Dartmouth Hall here's the Church of Christ, which is right across the street. And so the next slide shows us how one of the criticisms was that the two schools weren't even related and they had nothing to do with each other. That's just historically and factually wrong.
Now, you've mentioned two schools here, Randy. I don't know that you've mentioned the other school.
Yeah, I'm gonna clear that up right now. Dartmouth College, of course, we know about today, and what today we would call an Ivy League. It is an Ivy League school. Ivy League simply means that is one of the colonial schools approved under the King's Crown back in the days of the pre-Revolutionary War days. And Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Dartmouth, there's 12 or 13 of them, I believe. So there's two schools, though. Dartmouth College actually came out of what was originally in the 1700s called Moor's, it's a long name, Moor's Charity Indian School, I believe.
I think that's right.
It got kind of shortened up, at least informally, by Joseph Smith's mother as the Academy. It was, a lot of people refer to it as Dartmouth Academy, or excuse me, Moor Academy. Out of Moor Academy, we'll just call it Moor Academy. Out of Moor Academy came Dartmouth College, which we know about today. It wasn't the other way around. We have Moor Academy to thank for the fact that out of that came a college, which later, today we would consider Ivy League. They were not only related, Dartmouth came out of it, but Dartmouth was for the intellectually gifted in the community and of a wide range. And basically the students had, and here's the details on the schedules on evening and morning, church attendance at the Church of Christ, the Sunday schedules, and so forth. But essentially you see here that the students at both Moor Academy and at Dartmouth College met together, went to church and sermons together morning and evening, and their chores, and everything else were oftentimes together. So even though the younger kind of prep school kids were younger, intellectually gifted, the general expectation is that they would go on later, if successful at Moor Academy, into Dartmouth College when they got older. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very good. So would it be correct to say that, okay, so there's Dartmouth College, there's also Moor's Academy, right?
Yeah.
And they're on the same campus?
Not only the same campus, the same buildings.
So what's the difference then between a student at Moor's and a student at Dartmouth at the time?
Well, think about it like I did my grad work at UCLA. I don't know if, well, think of it this way. You go to college, it's not unusual to have a prep school associated with that university.
Right.
It was the same kind of thing. It was the younger students, generally speaking, although some of the students at Moor Academy were as old as 80 years old. The criteria was if you were singled out as being academically, intellectually gifted. But you were more, generally speaking, high school age, which is exactly what Hyrum Smith was at this time. He was high school aged. And then from the prep school or the academy, you would go to college, and it's literally on the same campus or in the same buildings.
Okay, very good.
Anything
else you want to mention?
Yeah.
You said the same professors?
A lot of the time, the same professors, same criteria. It's just that in the classroom, I think it's safe to say that the academy students would be taught algebra and pre-algebra, and college you're doing trigonometry and more advanced math. But it's a continuum of the same educational process.
Okay, very good. With a high value on educating missionaries to go and preach to the Native Americans, right?
Yeah, does that sound familiar?
Yeah, that's one of the main missions of the Moor's charitable Indian school, I think.
Yeah, what do you know? It became a main mission of the early LDS Church.
That is the Book of Mormon in a nutshell.
Yeah, yes, it was
converting the Native Americans to Christianity. That's the whole purpose of the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, and that is not an idea unique with Joseph Smith. That idea existed many places, including right where Hyrum Smith went to school, and right in the community of the Smith family who lived there. And the next slide is we often hear the story of Joseph Smith's leg surgery, all true. And, having been through a childhood surgery myself, I frankly have a lot of empathy for Joseph Smith, because it's a hideous thing for a kid to go through. But he was in very good hands, and the doctor, the medical doctor, Dr. Nathan Smith, who no family relationship, who performed this leg surgery on Joseph Smith, this was his office on the Dartmouth campus. And he founded the Dartmouth Medical School, which of course today is a very prestigious school. It was prestigious back then too. And Dr. Smith would go to the Smith home a few miles away, and they went there multiple times, and they ultimately performed this revolutionary surgery on Joseph Smith's leg, which was highly successful. And Joseph Smith's mother was adamantly opposed to his leg being amputated, which would have been the go-to remedy for his condition. But they managed to save the leg. But that was the good news. The bad news is that Joseph Smith was bedridden and basically had to convalesce for a period of years. But flipping back to the good news, his brother Hiram is going to school down the street and would come and tutor him, according to Richard Behrens. So this is the back and forth.
I'm just going to throw something in here. Yeah, the connection is so interesting to me, because what your research has done is helped me understand the story that I hear many times, and I think probably many people in the church hear this story many times about Joseph Smith and his leg surgery. But the thing is the way it's always been presented, at least the way I always understood it, was very odd, because here's Joseph Smith with his family. They're out in the middle of nowhere, and they're engaged in this farming. And then Joseph Smith has a problem with his leg. And then all of a sudden, as if by a miracle, 3 doctors appear at the manger. And suddenly they're at the doorstep. And it's like, where the heck did these doctors come from? Because they're so far from civilization. But actually, they're not. They're just how many miles from Dartmouth Medical School?
Yeah. They're within about 5 miles away.
Oh, my gosh. You see, that just makes so much more sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm about to show you the pictures of, maybe I'm not, the Joseph Smith homes. This is where Joseph Smith was born. Oh, and then the next shot is of one of the Smith homes. The Smiths actually lived in 2 different homes. Today, one of them is now I think it's a Kentucky Fried Chicken site. But they're both the homes. And this home, this is the Joseph Smith's home near Dartmouth. You can walk to Dartmouth from there. And today, by today's standard, it's still a gorgeous home. I would gladly live in a home this cool. I mean, it's legit. And they make it sound like they were living in lean-to, fortresses in the middle of the sticks. Well,
the little log cabin is what we see, but I think the little log cabin is what they lived in while they were working on the house. Alvin was working on the house. He passed away. It took a hit, so it was delayed. But this is what ultimately was built.
This is the home they lived in. Yeah. Now, granted, the home where Joseph Smith was born, which they have a visitor center, make a big deal about. I mean, you can see to the left there on the lawn, that's the outline for the cabin. It was quite humble. So granted, he was born in a humble log cabin, but the Mormon narrative, they stick with that and only that. They don't show you the home that he then later moved to, which is the beautiful white home, which and from that angle, you don't see one of the wings of the home. It was, I don't know if that was added later. I don't think it was. I think it was in place at the time of the Smith family there.
It was in back of the house?
Huh?
It's in back of the house?
It's at an angle where what you see here is behind it. Because at the time I took the pictures, I wasn't sure if the wing was in place or not. I didn't want to overstate the case. But even with just that, what you see there, that's quite a nice home.
It does seem like every effort has been made by the church to keep Joseph Smith poor and ignorant.
Oh, yeah. My mission is to make Joseph Smith smart again.
Okay, very good.
Yeah,
because you don't see this picture a whole lot, and at least I haven't in church manuals and church resources since I joined the church in '78. Oh, here's a map.
Exactly, and this map, I have a GIS guy in my office. I had him do this, but to exact specifications. The Sharon, Vermont is where Joseph Smith was born. That was a 25-mile drive from there to Dartmouth. But then the family moved to Lebanon, New Hampshire. Now that sounds like far away, but that's just right across the river. So right across the state line. And then Norwich, Vermont. Those are where the Smith family literally lived for a period of years during the period we're talking about.
Interesting. By the way, just to clarify, when I say the church tries to keep Joseph Smith poor and ignorant, I am talking about his youth to make the Book of Mormon production seem the more miraculous.
Exactly. And it's such a false narrative. And what interesting thing I've noticed is that true believing members just don't believe it. It's so foreign to anything they've ever heard. They just are very resistant and think that this is coming from Mars. And even the ex-Mormon community has a hard time believing it. They don't get it quite the first time is explained because, again, it's so foreign to everything and all the neurology and growing up Mormon. It just doesn't resonate. But, excuse me, these are historical facts, historical places, and this is what actually happened, which is baffling because I never heard about it growing up in the church.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat.
So here's the last slide in terms of recapping the Dartmouth thing. But, and this is explained in the first episode we did, is Joseph Smith left and Hyrum Smith left the area with a really well exposed to ancient America folk religion, mainstream Christianity. According to Richard Behrens, Hyrum Smith would have attended well over 1,000 mainstream Christian sermons, which we're going to talk about later. Exposure to Greek mythology. Well, why is that important? Well, Greek mythology has a pre-existence. It has multiple gods. It has multiple goddesses. It has eternal sex. It has a lot of these things that later showed up in Mormon theology. And these concepts were discussed openly in the classrooms at Moor and at Dartmouth. And also discussions around Islamic polygamy, Islamic prophets and new scripture with the Quran, all post New Testament. All these concepts were discussed. And also Masonic temples. Professor John Smith was also the ringleader of the local Masonic temple. And the Masonic temple was a prominent feature of the Dartmouth community. So I want to be very clear what I'm saying and not saying because I don't want to be accused, although I have been very much wrongly accused of overselling this. I'm simply saying that Hyrum Smith and the Smith family were exposed to these ideas. And I'm not saying they were exposed to these ideas only in the Dartmouth community. They were exposed to them maybe before, certainly after in Palmyra, and maybe Joseph Smith got the idea for the pre-existence somewhere else. But these conversations and the initial concepts would have been very much part of the Dartmouth community overlay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very good.
Yeah. Okay, so this is, we're switching gears. That was kind of a quick review of Dartmouth. Now I want to, after I did that episode with you, I got some pretty wild hate from the Mormon Apologists, and which is kind of fun. So let's.
You're just trying to say Joseph Smith had a little more education, informal education, than maybe they accounted for.
And I'm not saying it. Richard Behrens is saying it. And it's backed up by the Dartmouth archives. This is historical fact. They hate it. They want to keep Joseph Smith, as ignorant as possible. But sorry, that narrative just doesn't fly. So the next slide is the Mormon Apologists. I have just a quick outline of 7 things. They said Hyrum Smith did not attend Dartmouth. Well, that's a straw man. I've never said Hyrum Smith attended Dartmouth. Richard Behrens never said it. He attended Dartmouth's Moor Academy. And I've been crystal clear, and Richard Behrens, in quoting Richard Behrens, who made it crystal clear, it wasn't Dartmouth College, it was Dartmouth's Moor Academy. So that's a criticism against an argument that was never made. Okay, Number 2 is Dartmouth Moor Academy was an elementary school. Well, that's false. I'm going to show that in a minute. That's just
Is it more like a high school, would you think, if it's sort of a feeder into the college?
Yeah, it was a prep school. I think of it as a prep school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, high school age. Dartmouth and Moor Academy are not connected. Well, we're going to blow that one out of the water. Hiram Smith only took a math class. That is patently false, according to virtually everyone, but some apologists have taken that position. When I say some apologists, I'm about to talk about Jonathan Neville specifically, and your buddy Brad Whitbeck. Is that how you say his name?
I think he pronounces it Whitbeck.
Whitbeck.
Not Whitbeck.
Excuse me. I didn't mean to mispronounce it. No, he took shots at me, and then all.
Wait a second. Brad took shots at you. He took shots at me recently. He called me evil.
I thought you were evil.
Well, he called me that anyway.
Yeah,
Just because I'm evil doesn't mean I like to be called evil.
You're not evil. I get called a liar all the time, and I say my response is always the same. It's like, okay, well, that's interesting. Maybe I did something wrong. Show me the specific lie, and I'll apologize and fix it. I've never seen a single apologist ever do that once.
Yeah, sometimes they're quicker to call people liars than they are to actually point out what the lies are.
Yeah, never seen it. But nonetheless, I'm a liar. All right, so it's all nonsense. Okay, number five. Yeah, number 5, Smith is not related to Dr. John Smith. Well, there's no published evidence of that. I'll show you what they were hanging their head on, but the only published literature out there is that they are related, but with or without a technical family relationship, that's a red herring. It really doesn't matter. So that's a dead-end argument. Number 6 is Hiram Smith attended only for 1.5 years. Jonathan Neville takes it even further to, it's to say he attended 1 quarter in 2014. Patently false, according to the Mormon Church itself.
I'm guessing you meant 1814.
Maybe, yeah. And
2014.
Oh yeah, I think thank you for catching that. And then Hiram Smith only attended 1 quarter in 1840. Excuse me. There's the Jonathan Neville thing. So let's address these one at a time quickly, so you can see the backlash has been very harsh, very unfair, and frankly, very intellectually dishonest, in my opinion. And let's and by the way, this is presented without any. I'm showing you citations. I'm showing you quotes. I'm showing my research. My Komodo's wide open. Their Komodo's sealed shut because they don't show you any evidence to come up and back up these wild claims.
Is that like a Komodo dragon?
Something like that. Yeah. Okay. Komodo or Komodo. You're the Japanese.
I hope you're not thinking of kimono, because all of a sudden this show's getting kind of blue.
Never mind. We'll take it back. Okay. All right. We'll stick with Komodo dragon.
Perfect. Okay. You show me your Komodo and I'll show you mine.
Exactly. Okay. So this is a book published by, as far as I know, it has nothing to do with Mormonism. And this idea that Dartmouth and Moor weren't related. Well, this book makes it quite clear that the New Hampshire House of Representatives in 1807 reaffirmed the relationship between the two entities. They were very much related. They were always related, and this has been reaffirmed here within this book. So just blew that criticism out of the water. And then the next one is...
Hey, Randy, I know you're trying to go quickly, but for completion's sake, let me just say this book is titled The Indian History of an American Institution, Native Americans in Dartmouth. All right. And it's published in 2010. And what that quote goes on to say is, New Hampshire House of Representatives in 1807, so before Hiram, reaffirmed the relationship between the two entities, i.e. between Moor's Charity School and Dartmouth, saying, quote, in 1807, it has always been considered that Dartmouth College and Moor's Charity School are different branches of the same institution, and that the president of said college ever has been and ever should be president of said school. So that's how close they have. They have the same president even.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They sure do. And I think this addresses the criticism that Brad Whitbeck, I hope I said his name right.
That was good. I think so. Yeah.
Close enough. Anyway. Okay. So then they say, well, it was an elementary school. Like he went and played kickball there. Again, false. Here's pages from the actual archives, Dartmouth. The youngest students, again, the criteria is if you're intellectually gifted. It didn't seem to have an age criteria, quite honestly. The youngest student I could find was 7 years old, and the oldest was 83 years old. Again, primarily they were high school age. And this is right from the Dartmouth archives itself. Again, the apologist said something unresearched and demonstratively false. Can you believe that, RFM? They would do that?
It is hard to believe, but I do note that even though you said that there's not really research about John Smith being related to the Smith family, the Joseph Smith family. Mm-hmm. I can't help notice that this prodigy who was there at age 7 is Horace Smith. And I'm wondering if there might be a connection there.
Well, I don't know. The short answer is I don't know, but I'm about to address the genealogy between John Smith and the Smith family in just a second.
Right. And the connection, of course, I refer to is between Horace Smith and John Smith, the president of the school. And maybe that accounts for why it is that he got this special treatment.
Yeah. And some people think that Horace Smith, well, there's been some confusion. Some people think it was a misspelling for Hiram Smith. I don't really know. And frankly, I don't want to spend the time worrying about it because it's inconsequential. Anyway, the next, well,
would that fit in time-wise? Would that fit in time-wise?
I don't
being Hiram Smith.
I don't know. I remember somebody saying it did fit in and then somebody arguing with it, and I didn't take it to its conclusion.
Okay, because you had said Hiram was born in 1800, right? And it looks like Horace was born in 1807, according to this.
Yeah, so I tend to think it wasn't the same guy, but there are faithful members, I think, I seem to recall, that thought it was something along those lines. Anyway, the next slide is the subjects. Oh, they said that it just taught math and it was had a very limited curriculum. Well, here it is, right from the archives. Again, the apologists are demonstratively saying things that are false. They taught, and this is, by the way, their spelling of things. So some of these things have a alternative spelling, but arithmetic, the Greek and New Testament, English and grammar, geography, Greek, Latin, religious instruction, Virgil, which honestly I don't even know what that means. There were a variety of topics.
Yeah, Virgil was one of the classic writers. He's not Homer, but he's Virgil. I'm pretty sure Virgil comes later. Homer did he did the Odyssey and the Aeneid, and Virgil did, what did he do? I can't remember. It's the story about, what is it? Hang on a second. It's a story about the founding of Rome. And
you could be, I majored in finance and accounting, and
it's another one of those strange words, but let's see here. Virgil, come here. When he's not, leading people like Dante through the underworld. Come on, what was it? No, it's the Aeneid. He wrote the Aeneid.
Okay.
Iliad. I'm thinking of Iliad for Homer. See, Iliad for Homer, Aeneid for Virgil.
Okay. So you get the idea that there were a wide variety of topics, and then the next slide shows us that the routine. Do you want to read that?
Let's see. The Dartmouth, the Moor Academy, the routine. Okay, the students, this is from the Indian History of an American Institution, that same book we quoted from earlier. The students, they began with prayers before sunrise. School began with prayer at 9 o'clock. So there's 2 prayers already, and it's only 9. ended at 12, began again at 2. So this is the school, and ended at 5 o'clock. So 9 to 12 is 3 hours. 2 to 5 is 3 hours in the afternoon. Evening prayers were attended before daylight was gone. Afterward, they applied to their study. So more study at night. In addition to the scriptures, students studied Greek and Latin, Virgil, I think, being a Latin text, and practiced penmanship. They also learned husbandry, both to help support the school and to begin their adoption of the agricultural way of life that Wheelock regarded as crucial to their future.
Yeah. So they had quite a regimented routine. Hiram Smith lived, even though his home was 5 miles away and he could have walked home. He lived on the campus. I think it's safe to say, a lot of the time. And this would have been his routine along with the Dartmouth College. By the way, these were not vast, the student bodies. There were relatively few numbers of students in both Moor Academy and Dartmouth College. So that was a routine together, which contradicts what the apologists say. And then the next one addresses this Dr. John Smith. This is the page right from the my binders, my research binders, showing the genealogy between Dr. John Smith and Joseph Smith's family. And it's out there. It's been published, peer reviewed. I'm not saying it's certified true, but the next slide shows us where the apologists get the idea that they're not related. Oh, and by the way, I want to say that Richard Behrens got the idea or got the information for this relationship from the alumni publications from Dartmouth College. So if we go to the next page, we'll see. You got the next slide?
You want the next slide here?
Yeah, there it is. This is right from the published alumni magazine, and my pictures are covering it up what we want to see. Is there some way to
that?
Okay, there we go. Okay, Dr. John Smith, it shows his pedigree here. And this is what Richard Behrens would have gone from. And then the next slide shows us what the apologists, these are handwritten notes. And I don't know, and I don't believe they know who actually made these notes, where you can see somebody went through and made a number of notations, not just with Dr. John Smith, but with other people in the margins. That's never been verified as far as I know. It's never been published as far as I know, but that's what the Mormon apologists are hanging their hat on in taking this great issue with where John Smith and the Joseph Smith's family distantly related or not. Frankly, it doesn't make any difference if they are or aren't. But I think Richard Behrens kind of wins out in the credibility department because these anonymous handwritten notes, I'm not a genealogist, but I don't find it compelling to jump to the conclusion that they're correct. Do you see what I mean?
Oh, right. Absolutely. So the note that you're referring to has to do with John Smith, and then the letters after his name. It says the son of Joseph and Elizabeth, then in parentheses, Palmer, referencing her maiden name, I imagine, Smith. And here the change that's made is that it says Palmer in parentheses, but then above it is written the name Sawyer, and then in parentheses, a question mark. So somebody came along and was wondering if Elizabeth's maiden name, in other words, John Smith's mother's maiden name, was actually Sawyer instead of Palmer. And I think that's the import of that. Is it a change, or it's a note, really? It's a question mark.
It's a note with a question mark.
Yeah. But
the Mormon apologists take that to the bank as rock solid, done. And there needs to be some evidence to back that up, which I haven't seen. And frankly, I don't think they've seen either. So the next slide gets into it. And this is what really kind of shook me up is Steve Pinecker, of course, we know, and I think very highly of Steve. He called me up one day and he says, Randy, we got, I got a buddy, Jonathan Neville. He's a nice guy. He's a faithful member of the church. And you're a nice guy, and you're more of a critic of the church, but you go about things in a nice enough way. I was hoping to have you both on an episode to kind of discuss your differences on the Dartmouth thing. And I said, well, sure, I'd be happy to do that. And I took him at his word that Jonathan Neville was a smart, nice guy. And so we had this episode, and this is a transcription. I actually got a transcription of the manuscript, but Hiram Smith basically, Jonathan Neville during the episode, just out of the sidelines, said, well, the only evidence is that Hiram Smith attended Moor's Academy for 1 quarter in 1814. Well, that contradicted everything I'd ever heard. It certainly contradicted Richard Behrens, and frankly, he didn't have anything to back that up when he said it. And I asked for it, and after the episode ended, I asked for it, and finally, he sent me some stuff, which you will see in a minute, just crumbles and falls apart. But that's what kind of started this thing that, hey, here's Jonathan Neville writes all these books, and he's he's big in the Mormon apologetics thing, and he's taking aim at this, and he's making a very dramatic claim that contradicts everything I'd ever heard, and certainly undermines what Behrens said and what I saw and everything else. And this is where kind of the issue became evident. Boy, these apologists are really unhappy with this research. They want to keep Joseph Smith the ignorant, uneducated farm boy.
When Jonathan Neville is saying that, is he referencing like a document with Hiram Smith's name on it that shows he was attending Moor's charity school, and that there's only one of those for 1 quarter, but there's other evidence aside from that that shows he attended longer?
Yeah, when he talks about evidence, he's talking about the evidence he selected. He's not talking about all the evidence. And when we were on the episode, he didn't even have that. But there is a reference. Hiram Smith's name is indeed in the attendance records of 2014. But there's other evidence, and we'll get into that. But that was kind of throwing down the gauntlet to say, what's going on here? Because if he were right, it would undermine everything Behrens said, and certainly everything I've said on the topic.
Okay, right. And once again, I think I and the audience have all agreed that every time you say 2014, we'll just understand it as 1814.
Yeah, just make the auto. Sorry about that. It's my brain.
It's all fine. I mean, you've got like 1,000 facts you're juggling right now.
1,001. Okay, so here's another transcript from Jonathan Neville where he's dismissing all of Lucy Mack Smith's testimony. Do you want to read it?
Yes. And so the other thing that people rely on is Lucy Mack Smith's recollection and her history. So this is Jonathan Neville speaking on that episode.
Yes.
Okay. The other thing that people rely on, people like you, Randy, is Lucy Mack Smith's recollection and her history, because she wrote the history about Joseph Smith, right? And she talks about Hiram, and that's where she talks about him going to that school, where she says they sent him there, and then he came home because of the flu epidemic, or the epidemic that was there. All right. But she never spells out when exactly he went and when he came home. She just says he went and came home. So we don't know from her any dates. So all we have to go on is what Dartmouth itself has in their records. Wait a second. I see what you did there. So anyway, that was just an interesting example of this idea that he attended Dartmouth for 4 years and thousands of lectures. There's no actual evidence of that.
Yeah. And that's quite a bold statement. And again, I would contend that he's factually wrong. Eyewitness testimony, and certainly Joseph Smith's mom would qualify as eyewitness testimony that he attended before the pandemic, the flu, and which puts it at about 1811, is evidence. I think he's factually wrong. I think what he's saying is grossly misleading and intellectually dishonest. And I think I'm not alone. In fact, I know I'm not alone, because I'm going to show you what faithful LDS sources actually say on the topic. Forget me and forget Richard Behrens for a moment. Let's see what a number of other scholars say, because you know what, Jonathan Neville and other apologists, they all disagree with you.
Okay, so hang on a second. I know that he mentions there being a document with Hiram Smith's name on it for one quarter in 1814, I think he said.
Mm-hmm.
But his mom, not Jonathan Neville's, but Hiram's, Lucy Mack Smith, said that he was there at the academy and he came home when the epidemic started.
Yeah, there was he says earlier that the flu epidemic, it was the Spanish flu, I think, if I remember right. It came along, and Hiram Smith moved back to the Smith home when he got that flu.
Okay, so do we know when that flu happened?
Yeah, I looked it up, and it's I don't think there's a dispute over that. I think it was 1813 or 1812. It was kind of spanned over, if I remember right, it was over the winter of 1812 into 1813.
The reason I'm asking the question, I think you know why, but I just want to put a fine point on it for the audience. There's a document that has his name on it, Hiram Smith's name on it, attending in 1814.
In 1814, but his mom's saying that by reference to the flu, it would have been 1811,
saying
or maybe
that he went there
before
the flu, which is before 1814.
Yes.
So there's more than just one quarter that's being referenced.
Yeah. So Jonathan Neville has this interesting way of just selecting the evidence that he likes, which is an attendance roll, but not looking at all the evidence, which would certainly include what his own mom said.
By the way, have you ever argued that Hiram Smith attended Dartmouth for 4 years?
I haven't argued it. Richard Behrens argued it. He was at least 4 years. And let's go through what all the faithful scholars say, because there's not a big contention that Richard Behrens is saying anything controversial.
Right. I just note that he's using Dartmouth here as shorthand for Moor's Academy, just the way that you are, but nobody's calling Jonathan Neville on it.
Yeah, exactly. So let's look at what the faithful Mormon academics and scholars say, which there's a variety of scholars and a variety of dates, but they are all within the general parameters of 1811 to 1816. That's actually 5 years, but I don't think there's an argument that Hiram Smith took some time off for the flu, so that knocks it back to 4 years.
So before we continue with the slideshow, I do know that the Spanish flu is what it was called, I think, in 1918, right after World War I.
Oh.
And I did look up the severe epidemic. This is AI. The severe epidemic that hit New Hampshire and surrounding New England areas in 1812 was known as spotted fever.
Oh, good.
So that's what it says. And then there is an article by the Historical Society of Cheshire County called The Spotted Fever Epidemic of 1812 by Alan F. Rumrill. So this certainly appears to be something that historians have acknowledged and pinpointed pretty much to 1812. So if Hiram's going to school before 1812 and he's going after 1812, then it's more than a quarter.
Absolutely. And Jonathan Neville is just factually, demonstratively wrong.
Yeah, he doesn't want to believe what Hiram's mom has to say. He wants to keep Joseph Smith as dumb as possible because he believes the Book of Mormon is miraculous. And if you make Joseph as ignorant as possible and the Book of Mormon as complicated as possible, then there's plenty of room to stick God in between.
Right. That's exactly it. It's a very simple strategy, and they want to preserve that and defend that position despite the facts and, despite the real evidence. But sorry, the facts don't back it up.
Okay, we'll continue with the slides. Faithful Mormon academics and scholars talking about 1811 to 1816 vis-a-vis what Hiram Smith and Moor Academy, right?
Yeah, so let's start with what Richard Behrens says, and this is, I've done a screenshot of his actual article. He says that he was at Dartmouth from 1811 to 1816, and then he takes out a year for the fact that, he got what you've identified as the spotted flu. So that makes sense to me. It makes sense to, as we're about to see, to virtually everyone else.
Okay, very good. And is this how Richard Behrens came to this sentence where he says in 1811 and left in 1816, that's Hiram Smith at Dartmouth Community? That's where you get it from, is basically combining Lucy Mack Smith's comment about Hiram going there before the spotted flu, and also the document that shows that Hiram attended at least one class there in 1814.
Well, excuse me, certainly yes. And by the way, they don't teach this at the church, but Joseph Smith's father left by himself in 1816. The family stayed behind to 1817. And in the winter of 1817, they went to Palmyra. So actually, Richard Behrens is being a little bit conservative here, saying 1816 when they actually left in 1817.
But he's beyond 1814.
Oh, yeah. But the start date was 1811, and you were about to see some people say 1812, but it wasn't for one quarter in 1814. Yeah, and what we got to remember something. This is the 1800s. There's no internet. There's no computers. It's all handwritten documents. They took a whole year of documents, and from what I'm told, they sent them to Scotland for a fundraising activity. All the attendance and all the Moor Academy records, and they never got them back. So in other words, there's a lot of missing documents. That doesn't mean he didn't attend, and it's unreasonable to think that he didn't, particularly when his mom said he did. So there's sensible, reasonable explanations why we don't have records, because frankly, the archives are incomplete from that time frame.
Well, it's quite a span. It's 5 years from 1811 to 1816, which Richard Behrens proposes for Hiram's attendance.
Right.
Not continuously, but during that span.
Yeah. So here's the actual transcript from Lucy Mack Smith's history. I don't know if you want to take the time.
Absolutely. And as our children had in a measure, this is Lucy, been debarred the privilege of schools, we began to make arrangements to attend to this important duty. To this end, we established our second son, Hiram Smith, in an academy at Hanover. There's only the one, right? It can only be talking about Moors.
Yeah.
And the rest that were of sufficient age, we sent to a common school, which is quite convenient. So this is not a common school that Hiram's going to.
Right.
But this state of things did not long continue. The typhus fever came into Lebanon and raged tremendously. And among the number seized with this complaint was first Sophronia and then Hiram, so he did catch it, who was taken while at school and came home sick. All right, so if he catches it at school and comes home sick, he was probably there during the epidemic.
And actually started before the epidemic. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So here's the evidence for that. So sorry, Jonathan Neville and others. This is from the Encyclopedia of Mormonism, hardly a unfaithful critical source. And here they say that age 11, which is exactly 1811, Hiram Smith went off to Moor's charity school. So here it is from another source, which Jonathan Neville has conveniently ignored.
Associated with Dartmouth College, it says there as well.
Yeah. Nobody's arguing with me except for Jonathan Neville and Richard
Brad,
your buddy Brad Whitbeck. and some others lesser known, but of course they're associated. And according to here, Hiram started in 1811, exactly what Behrens said. And then the next one comes from the B.H. Roberts Foundation. You want to hit that one?
Yes, this is Bruce A. Van Orden reports that Hiram Smith went to school much earlier than Joseph. So he's born 1800, February, that's Hiram. At age 11, Hiram was sent to Moor's Charity School associated with Dartmouth College. About 2 years later, a severe epidemic of typhoid fever broke out, and Hiram returned home ill to find several siblings ill as well. Joseph Jr. was stricken with the dreaded disease, which developed into, that was the left leg. So this is the whole thing that caused Joseph to get sick and require that leg operation in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah.
And apparently Hiram Smith was there for a couple of years before the plague hit.
Yeah. And what I like about what you said earlier was that you hear these bits and pieces about the doctors miraculously showing up on the frontier. Mm-hmm. With this context, I clearly see the church is not telling the whole story.
No, and sometimes when you don't get the whole story, things seem strange, like the doctor showing up on the front doorstep. But then when you hear about the whole story, then it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Now, this is from Mormon R, which is an anonymous pro-Mormon blog. Ironically, and this is kind of amusing, at least to me, after the episode I did with Steve Pinecker, I kept asking Jonathan Neville, what are your sources for this stuff you said? And after a while, he says, well, there's 127 primary sources that you've ignored. And it's like, that's interesting. Can I see them? You're making these claims. I'd like to see them. So he sent me this link to Mormon R. So we're talking about a pro-Mormon website with 127 primary sources about Joseph Smith's pre-1830 education. Well, when you actually go to the sources themselves, there are only 4 that involve the Dartmouth era. So he's way overselling the number of resources. You get down to 4. But let's look what they actually say. Do you want to read this first question and the answer there? Because it's quite revealing.
Okay, at Mormon R, it says, poses this question of itself. Does this lack of education about Joseph Smith here, right, show that he couldn't have written the Book of Mormon himself? Their answer is yes. This lack of education does show that Joseph Smith could not have written the Book of Mormon himself. Of course, they're saying written, not dictated, but still, that's the question they're posing. Yes, it does support that idea. Now, did you want me to go on further in that or skip over to the one to the side?
No, I think you nailed it right there. This is the official narrative they're trying so desperately to defend. But yeah, go ahead to the next one.
Then they asked themselves the question, did Joseph's brother Hiram go to Dartmouth College? No, it says. Hiram Smith was sent to Moor's Indian Charity School, a grammar school for children. With some were 7, some were 80, these children, years old, when he was about 12 years old, that's close to 11, and may have attended sporadically until he was about 15.
Boom. So here, what you got is some truth intermixed with some falsehoods. They say, well, nobody's claiming, again, that he went to Dartmouth College. It was Moor Academy, which is affiliated and very much part of Dartmouth College. So they split hairs there. Now here they're calling it a grammar school. That is patently false. These are high school age kids, going there. So this is where this grammar school nonsense is coming from.
Well, grammar schools typically don't feed into universities. And yet, even in their bottom paragraph in that section, they acknowledge that the charity school, Moor's, was operating as a feeder school for Dartmouth University.
Yeah. And here's where the Mormon apologists are just flat out busted, is according to his own source that he sent me from an anonymous blog, which is hardly solid academic research.
They're certainly not primary.
Certainly not primary. Hyrum Smith attended from age 12 to 15, not the 1 quarter in 2014 that Jonathan Neville is pushing and promoting.
Right.
So, I'm really scratching my head how Jonathan Neville can feel good about making this grandiose claim in spite of the fact that his own anonymous, non-peer-reviewed research contradicts him.
I feel like between you and Jonathan Neville, pistols at dawn are in the future.
I hope so. All right. So the next one is from the Hyrum Smith Diaries, which is BYU research. It's on the BYU website. It's real easy. Susan Fales, who did the research out of BYU. This is on the BYU website. You can see the URL there. Attended 1811 to 1815. Almost exactly what Richard Behrens said. Again, Jonathan Neville, you are wrong. According to BYU, forget me, the evil apostate, according to BYU itself.
And that's where it says during the years 1811 to 1815, Hyrum was able to sporadically attend Moor's Charity School in Hanover, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And gain some basic education. Doesn't mention its connection to Dartmouth there.
Right. And then this is the Hyrum. I mean, this goes on and on. There's just an avalanche of information that contradicts Jonathan Neville and these others. The Hyrum Smith Association, again, very pro BYU, pro Mormon, pro everything. You want to read what's highlighted there?
Yeah, and this appears to be another instance of the Encyclopedia of Mormonism article by Bruce A. Van Orden in a different format, but it mentions age 11, age 11, Hyrum was sent to Moor's Charity School associated with Dartmouth College. At least he keeps in that association.
Yeah. So again, everyone seems to be saying that. And then we go to the next one.
And this is a different author, Richard S. Van Wagener.
Yeah. And here, you want to read what's highlighted there?
Yes. Hyrum, age 12, was admitted to Moor's Indian Charity School on the campus of nearby Dartmouth College. His admission, his admission to the boarding school as an indigent worthy scholar not only indicates financial hardship, but considerable potential. And he's at the boarding school. So at least during that time period, apparently he's living there.
Oh, he is living there. And according to all sources. So, yeah. And then the last one I save, the best one I save for last. This is right from the Mormon Church website. Again, showing Jonathan Neville is dead wrong. You want to read it?
Yes, churchofjesuschrist.org. That's what the Mormons call their website. And under Hyrum Smith, it says at age 11, he entered Moor's Indian Charity School.
Yeah, 1811. They're agreeing exactly with Richard Behrens on the church website. So I don't know what else to say, but Jonathan Neville, everyone seems to disagree with you. And Brad Wetbeck, you seem to be quoting Jonathan Neville. And so garbage in, garbage out. I mean, the apologists are so desperate and so insecure to cling on to this narrative that Hyrum Smith and Joseph Smith were uneducated out on the frontier, and the Book of Mormon, as you so beautifully said, is so astounding that the gap, denotes evidence for the divine. I'm all for the divine, but I'm sorry, it's not adding up in this situation.
Yeah, and I get a feeling that nobody really cared that much about Hyrum Smith and his education until they started putting two and two together and thinking, well, I wonder if he talked to Joseph Smith about this.
Well, that's another criticism is how do you know they ever talk to each other? Well,
these guys never talk to each other. These two are famous in church history for being so close. And then actually, while Joseph Smith is recovering from his surgery, which we know Hyrum's been at Dartmouth College before that, and he'll go back after it. During that time period, Hiram Smith is spending days with Joseph Smith, according, I think, to Joseph Smith himself, talking about how he would take his hands, Hiram Smith would take his hands and put pressure, light pressure on Joseph Smith's leg that had been operated on to relieve the pain in some measure, just putting that light pressure. So they're doing this all day long, extended periods of time. God bless Hiram Smith. What a great guy. But they're not saying anything. They're not talking about anything.
Yeah. Well, I think I'll go with what faithful LDS scholar Richard Behrens said, and that is Hiram Smith was actively tutoring Joseph Smith as he convalesced from his leg surgery. And one thing, I'm obviously a critic of Joseph Smith, but Joseph Smith was not a dumb guy. He was a remarkably bright guy, and we're about to see that in a second. But the church narrative, which they try so hard to polish and maintain, it just crumbles and falls apart when you stack it up against some facts.
Very good.
Okay, so here I've just quickly summarized the dates and everything from all 9 sources, and they all start with 1811, primarily 1811, right up to the Mormon Church itself, and some say 1812 up to 1815 or 1816. So it's basically Jonathan Neville versus all the other faithful Mormon resources. Forget me, but stick with the primary faithful resources. I'm sorry, he is blown out of the water. He should apologize, but I'm not holding my breath.
Very good.
All right. So as you notice, we've hit the quick review of Dartmouth. We've hit what the Apologist's response was, which I think deserves a little time because to me, it's quite comical and it's quite fun to beat these guys over the head with facts. But I think that's been essentially hit. But with that context, we're ready to launch into chiasmus and the Book of Mormon and recent discoveries that came out of Dartmouth and Moor Academy that will show you exactly how Hiram Smith and Joseph Smith knew all about chiasmus.
Okay, I'm especially excited for this, Randy.
Yeah. So the first slide this is a particularly long chiasmus, but this graphically shows the structure. And this is why there's so many faithful Mormons, including me when I was in the Mormon church. It is very impressive because you see this language structure in this inverted V going down, making its point, and then reversing itself. It's like, how on earth could somebody have that in their head when it's so complex? I mean, what do you think about it?
Is that from the Book of Mormon?
I think it is. And
it's one of the longer ones.
Yeah.
It's Alma 36 then. That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
That is actually, I did an episode about the Light on Truth letter with Colby in which I took this to task and did some research into it that I had not really done before and found out that this looks a lot more impressive than it actually is.
Exactly. And it took me a long time to figure that out. And I was initially very impressed and impressed for decades by it. Yeah. And John Welsh was impressed by it. And first, superficially, it's very impressive.
Yeah.
All right. So
it's
the next
slide, a construct of the reader rather than the author.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So there's been a number of sources for chiasmus that have been discussed over the years. The list may be longer than this, but this is a really important key point because, excuse me, I'm not saying that the approach I'm about to reveal is the source. In my personal opinion, I think it's the most logical, makes the most sense. But there are other ways Joseph Smith could have come across chiasmus. Can we kind of talk through this checklist a little bit?
Sure.
So the first is Joseph Smith's dad was a school teacher, or there were school teachers in the Smith family, and maybe they knew about chiasmus in their, English courses and discussions of the English language. I don't know that there's much in the way of evidence for that, but it's certainly a possibility. Would you agree with that?
Possibility, yeah. I don't know if they called it chiasmus. There's all sorts of different terms for this structure, which I think was pretty well understood.
I'm glad you said that, because you're absolutely right. The word chiasmus is the term we use today, and it was the term used since the late 1800s. At the time of Joseph Smith, I want to be clear, it was not called chiasmus. I'm about to show you what it was called, but for the sake of simplicity, because John Welsh calls it chiasmus, I'm going to call it chiasmus.
Okay, and you next mentioned that it being chiasmus is observed in the King James Bible.
Yeah, that's the and so I'm going to show examples of that in a moment, but it's possible that Joseph Smith was smart enough to pick up chiasmus in the Bible itself, because they certainly exist there. And I can just say, I'll confess, I'm not smart enough. I never picked up on it, but maybe Joseph Smith, was smarter than me, and he picked up on it. Would you agree?
Well, the other thing is that what I continue to do, what I have done, and I don't think I'm the only one, is continually look back on these people back in early 19th century America and think of them as sort of ignorant about the Bible, when basically any guy on the street corner back then knew more about the Bible than a lot of very educated people today, because it was the thing to study. And it's the burned over district. It is the Second Great Awakening. And this is what everybody's talking about and studying and getting into.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's certainly a possibility. And it's a reasonable possibility. The next one is John Jebb and Thomas Boyes. They published literature related to what we today call chiasmus in London before the Book of Mormon was published. That's, so the concept was certainly being discussed, but it was over in London. So I don't know what availability what Joseph Smith had accessibility to that information, but it's possible somehow that information got to him from those publications.
Very, very possible. I mean, there was a lot of commerce going on between America and England at the time.
Very true. And then the other possibility is it was simply chiasmus was being used in sermons. So it was observed during while attending various sermons. Any thoughts?
No, but I like natural speaking patterns, because that's one of my favorites.
Tell us why it's one of your favorites.
Because when I do episodes where I'm riffing and I'm not going off of notes, but I am dictating in my head as thoughts come to me, I will frequently find myself doing chiasmus. And in fact, it's become a running gag frequently with Bill Reel, where I'll say something and I'll end up coming back reverse, and I'll end it and I'll say, and that's a chiasmus, which means it's true, and I am an ancient Hebrew. But it happens all the time. I did an episode about it. In fact, it's an indication to me that the Book of Mormon was dictated, as I think everybody pretty much agrees. I don't know. Everybody who agrees Joseph Smith is the author, I think, agrees it was dictated, whether they're faithful or, believing or non-believing. But I think that the chiasmus in the sermons is an indication that the Book of Mormon is indeed a dictated text.
Yeah, I certainly agree. And then the last one is the one I'm about to present, where there's a direct connection to the Smith household, taught in the classroom at Dartmouth and put into practice at the Dartmouth Church of Christ sermons right across the street. I have evidence we're going to see for the very first time publicly about to come up. I think, again, that spoiler alert, this is the most direct hit the nail on the head connection. But I, again, want to reiterate, it's not the only explanation. There are other sensible explanations, and people can use their own discretion at deciding what makes best sense for them.
Very good. Okay, with all those caveats out of the way.
All right. So what is chiasmus? And this is Chiasmus 101. And it was by a number of names. Some of them I can't pronounce. The first, can you say the first one? Because I
Yes,
can't.
antimetaboly. And you know how I can pronounce antimetaboly?
No.
Because I looked it up yesterday. And I got the computer to pronounce it for me. Otherwise, it's like a timetable. No, it's antimetaboly, which is really just a very short chiasmus.
Yeah. And we'll see examples in a second. Reverse parallel. Well, maybe you can pronounce it.
Parallelism.
Okay, thank
Reverse parallelism. A parallelism
Yeah.
is ABC, ABC. Reverse parallelism is ABC, CBA. That's your chiastic structure, just a different name.
Yeah. And then the same thing, which you can say and I can't.
Inverted parallelism.
Yeah.
And you like antimetaboly so much, you have it in the list twice.
I really like it, and I think that shows. And then the next one is communicado. Did I say that one?
It's commutatio or commutatio. It sounds like a curse out of Harry Potter.
Okay.
The commutatio curse.
The next one I'll take because I could say it. Inversion.
Yeah. And regressio.
Yeah. So this is all these terms are floating around. I don't want to say all, but these were the kind of terms floating around at the time of Joseph and Hiram in the Dartmouth era. But today, again, we call it chiasmus. It's a rhetorical ABBA writing style. It's a speaking style. It started with Aristotle. This is not new stuff, and others, where the concepts are stated and then restated in reverse order. Okay, you want to take it from there on the list?
Yeah, it's used to make a line punchy, memorable, or to highlight a contrast. Like when the going gets tough, the tough get going.
Mm-hmm.
Chiasmus can reverse ideas and structure without repeating exact words, okay? It's just the concept that's really key. It's easier to see if it's the exact words, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's also a little bit more elementary that way. Chiasmus was known in what became the United States from the very beginning, but not as a new discovery. It arrived fully formed from classical education from the Greeks. Yep. By the 17th century or 1600s, way before Joseph Smith, chiasmus was already being used in colonial America, especially in sermons, political writings, and education. Early American colonial elites were trained in Greek, Latin, and biblical rhetoric, and those who went to the Moor Academy. Classical devices like chiasmus were standard.
Yeah.
So that is another thing to note, is that it's not just ancient Hebrews who use this. It's also many, many ancient societies, including the Greeks, which may be where the Hebrews got it from. I don't know. However, it is common to a bunch of different ancient civilizations, not just the Hebrews, is the point.
Yeah. So let's take a look at how chiasmus is used today. I'm a big fan of John F. Kennedy. I read the LA Times growing up as a kid, and he would always, not always, but he would often have these great memorable statements that you would remember him for. Ask not what you, let me start over. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. His speechwriter was famous for using this ABBA format. You want to look at
that is one of the most famous quotes, I think, in American history.
Yeah.
That one you just read. These others are powerful, not quite so famous. Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate.
Right.
That's also from the same inaugural address. Okay.
Yeah.
But then, same year, a UN General Assembly speech, he says, mankind must put an end to war, or war will put an end to mankind.
Nice impression.
How am I doing? I'm winging it. Rice University, 1962, John F. Kennedy. We choose to go to the moon, not because it is easy, but because it is hard.
Yeah. So there's some examples of these. It's a very persuasive, memorable way to speak in sermons, in inaugurational events, and all over the place. So let's go back in time. Chiasmus is in the Bible. I don't think we want to read this, but this is in Matthew chapter 13. There's a chiasmus. And again, I've read that before. I didn't notice the pattern, but I did notice that it was compelling and persuasive and poetic almost. And that's what's really going on with the structure and the style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is throughout the Bible.
Yes.
Old and New Testaments.
Now, here's some quotes from Jesus. I'll do the first one.
I feel like you should be reading the Jesus quotes.
I'll read the Jesus. I like Jesus. Okay, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. There's a chiasmus. Whoever wants to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life will save it. Another one right from Jesus.
Anti-metaboly.
What's that?
Anti-metaboly, all over the place.
All over the place. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled. Whoever humbles himself will be exalted. That's in Matthew. Whoever would be great amongst you will be your servant, and whoever would be first amongst you must be the slave to all. So this is a demonstration. You don't use necessarily the exact same words. You can use synonyms or antonyms.
And this one is actually, I think, a parallelism as opposed to a reverse parallelism.
Yeah, you can get into all the technicalities, but I mean, I literally had lunch with a friend, Paul, yesterday. And I explained the bottom line we're about to get to. You could explain in 60 seconds. So if Hiram Smith had 60 seconds to explain this to Joseph Smith, that would have been easy to do. The concepts without getting into all the technicalities. With the measure you use it will be measured to you. And then finally, many who are first will be last, and the last first. Yeah. So Jesus himself, is using chiasmus structures all over the place.
Well, the fact that these are written in Greek, apparently initially, and the fact that it goes back to Greek, as you said in Aristotle, makes sense.
Yeah. It went back to Aristotle and then into the New Testament. And then the next slide, the apostles used it. And I don't know that we need to read these, but these are quotes from Peter, Paul, and John, where they're doing the same thing, huh?
And Ringo.
Yeah, I missed that part of the Bible, but
Peter, Paul, John, and Ringo.
I'm sure Ringo's there somewhere. So it was not just Jesus, it was the apostles in the Bible.
Yes.
And then
all of whom wrote quite well in Greek. Better than I can.
Yeah, so here it is in the Book of Mormon again. And by the way, the Book of Mormon is riddled with chiasmus. And I think I have a sneaky suspicion why it was used so much. But it is, John Welsh is right. It's throughout the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon is riddled with chiasmus.
Yes. Unfortunately, so is the Doctrine and Covenants, but that's a different line of argumentation. By the way, this slide is Mosiah chapter 5, verses 10 through 12. This is actually, I believe, if memory serves, the passage that John Welch was reading as a missionary in 1968, the following day after the sermon. And this is where he first identified chiasmus in the Book of Mormon. Yeah.
And he deserves credit for catching it. That's good. So the next slide is about John Welsh. There's a picture of him. There's a book he wrote. I got the book. Honestly, I was kind of disappointed. But he wrote an entire book on it. And you want to read that John Welsh quote at the top?
Yeah, and technically, I think this is a book that he edited. It has a number of entries on chiasmus in different societies and cultures, and that gives it the academic respectability, so that when he sneaks in his own chapter about chiasmus in the Book of Mormon, now it looks a little bit more official to cite it to this book as opposed to the Interpreter. Okay, what is it I'm supposed to be reading again?
The first quote at the top there.
Okay, no one in this is John Welch. No one in America, let alone in Western New York, fully understood, and he's going to really lean heavily on those words. Fully understood chiasmus in 1829.
He may have believed this was true when he said it in 1969, but it's certainly, as far as I know, he has not retracted it, because we know today, and I'm about to show the evidence, this is patently false today from what we know today. No one in America, let alone Western New York, knew about chiasmus or fully understood it. There's some weasel words there, but this doesn't hold water today. So I'm sorry, Professor Welsh. You should retract this or correct it for the record, because it may have been something you believed back in the day, but no longer is it true.
All right. Did you want to read this other part that's bolded?
Well, sure. Welsh did not disclose or build an argument around Hyasmus attendant at Dartmouth's Moor Academy. Well, I think by now he knows or should know about Dartmouth, and that would have naturally warranted some investigation. He could have easily done the research that I did do into the archives at Dartmouth and quickly learned that chiasmus was and laying down heads we're about to talk about was clearly in the Dartmouth curriculum, and chiasmus were a regular part of the sermon landscape at the Church of Christ across the street.
Okay, very good.
Okay, so here's chiasmus in the New England colonies, and this, I have citations for each one of these claims that are there. So this is all cited. You want to go through them?
Well, there's the King James Bible. You want me to read the entire paragraph?
Just read the bold part, and then the citations are there.
Okay, and we all know the King James Bible, the dominant text in colonial America. It is the authorized version that Joseph Smith used in his translation or his reworking of the Bible. Contains extensive chiastic structures and was central to sermons and education. Yep. Second, Puritan ministers were classically trained, which means Latin and Greek, and deliberately employed rhetorical devices, including chiasmus, in sermons. Miller documents, so he's the author of this article, The New England Mind. Miller documents the rhetorical and classical training of New England clergy and the reliance on structured rhetorical forms. Number 3, colonial education emphasized Greek and Latin rhetoric, and we saw that with Virgil, where chiasmus was standard. 4, sermons were not casual religious talks, but carefully constructed rhetorical artifacts. Berkovich explains how Puritan rhetoric, including inversion and balance structures, shaped early American discourse, and then there's a citation from that article. And finally, by the 17th century, remember Joseph Smith is in the early 19th. By the 17th century, chiasmus was already in use in colonial America through Puritan sermons, biblical interpretation, and classical education inherited from Greek and Latin rhetorical traditions. Now, by the way, these are not in quotation marks. These are synopses, correct?
Correct. Okay. But yeah, there's the citations to back them up.
Yeah.
So technically, again, splitting hairs, John Welsh is kind of teetering a little closer to the truth when he shifts the conversation to New York, outside of the colonial area. But surely I'm guessing he must have known that the colonies, this was no secret. It was.
Now you mean New England, right?
Oh, excuse me.
That are highlighted in
red. You're right. I'm juggling a lot of thinking here. But yeah, in the New England colonies, it was clearly known. But what he conveniently ignores is that's exactly where the Smith family was for years, in direct contact with this.
And there's no barrier between New England and New York, which borders it on its entirety of its eastern border, right?
Exactly.
There's not like some kind of force field that keeps knowledge of chiasmus from going from New England to New York, right?
Correct. And the Smith family was living in Dartmouth, which was an information highway, to Palmyra, which was literally a mile away from an information highway. They were not in the middle of nowhere. That's for sure.
Right.
Okay. So these are contemporary books, contemporary with Joseph Smith. There's the Solomon Spalding manuscript. I'm not a fan of those theories that have come out even more, and some stuff recently, not a fan. By the way, Solomon Spalding went to Dartmouth, and that is a point that is conveniently ignored. View of the Hebrews, I understand, has chiasmus in it. That was written by Ethan Smith. Well, guess where Ethan Smith went to school? He went to Dartmouth, and Ethan Smith's son was a contemporary with Hyrum Smith. Again, another, interesting data point conveniently swept under the rug by the Mormon Church apologists.
What does your dad do for a living? He's a farmer. What does your dad do? Well, he wrote this book, Hyrum.
Well, he had written it. He actually wrote it after Hyrum left, but the discussion points were clearly, incubating at that time frame.
And this isn't the first book written about the subject of ancient Hebrews coming over and becoming the ancestors of the Native Americans. That was all over the place, and many, many people believed it at the time.
Exactly. It was hardly an original thought. The first book of Napoleon, and then the late war, all of these books have arguments for connections to the Book of Mormon. And I'm still kind of dinking around in this stuff, but apparently there are chiasmus in 2 of these 4 books, but I haven't fully checked out the other 2. So I'm just pointing out that this concept was even making its way into the books, of which some people believe, and this is outside of the scope of what we're talking about today, of the connections to the inspirations for the Book of Mormon.
Very good. Got it.
Okay, so now the fun part. This is we're leading right up to what I'm pretty excited about. How Joseph Smith put chiasmus in the Book of Mormon, and we're gonna hit this very directly right now. So the next slide is just this is Dartmouth Hall. This is where Hyrum. I don't know if they lived here or lived in the dorms off to the side, but they certainly went to class here. Again, the Church of Christ is right across the street. But the next slide is one of my favorites, and it's this gentleman, Dr. Roswell Shurtleff. I showed this picture to Colby Reddish, and he thought it was AI.
I know. It's like he has a steampunk vibe going.
Oh, the guy's legit. I hope when I'm in my 80s, I hope at any time I look this legit and cool.
This is a real drawing of a real person who lived back then.
Yes, and he looks like a keyboard player from Pink Floyd. I mean,
he was aptly named Roswell.
Yeah. So I'm a fan of this guy, but Dr. Roswell Shurtleff was Hyrum Smith's pastor. He is the guy that you have never heard of before, of which Hyrum Smith would have sat, according to Richard Behrens, in sermons where Roswell Shurtleff was the pastor delivering sermons. So one day the lights went off in my head, and I thought, nobody's heard of this guy. And yet he clearly had a major influence and would have been a major influence on Hyrum Smith. And at Dartmouth, he was the pastor from I'm pretty sure I'm right here, 1811 to 1816. And I have access to the Dartmouth archives. Why don't I get all the curriculum I can from Dartmouth and the sermons and try and see if there's anything there. So this is the guy we'll be referring to. I'll just call him Roswell, but I love the guy. Okay, so the Dartmouth curriculum, do you want to just read those 2 bold things on the left, and then we'll connect it to the 17 and 1800s at Dartmouth College?
Yeah, Dartmouth curriculum, rhetoric, inverse parallelism, and chiasmus. Rhetoric is the broad art or study of effective speaking and writing, persuasion, style arrangement, argument delivery, etc. That's what rhetoric means. That was taught there. Chiasmus is one specific rhetorical figure, a device of word, order, or structure. often described as an inverted parallel structure, ABBA. ABBA.
So in the 1700s, there were at Dartmouth, there were linked courses of study explicitly including rhetoric and what's the next one? Declamation?
Declamation, yeah.
Yeah, and classical rhetorical theory. So in other words, putting that in today's English, you went to Dartmouth to learn to become a minister. That was
the Native Americans specifically.
To take the gospel to the American Indians. That was mission number one. And that obviously continued into the 1800s.
Yes.
The Dartmouth 1811, which is, by the way, the year that Hiram Smith would have started there, the official statement curriculum included rhetoric, criticism, declamation, and student orations. So in other words, you went there to learn how to preach the gospel. Back then, it's not like the Mormon bishops today that are totally untrained. And today you're selling tires and the next day you're giving marital advice when you're called bishop.
I like marital devices too.
Yeah, that's a different episode, marital devices. But back then you were licensed to be a minister, and getting the license required getting an education.
Yes.
Yeah.
One must be trained for the ministry.
Exactly. So here we get into what this kind of looked like in the Dartmouth classrooms and with the ministers on the next slide. And this is an AI generated picture, but basically the concept was called laying down heads. Now, this is very interesting because this was explicitly laid out in the Dartmouth curriculum, as we're about to see. And even more remarkably, you told me so that laying down heads is discussed in the Book of Mormon. So
it's referenced, apparently, yeah.
It's referenced.
It looks like this guy is writing down a talk for President Oaks, what with the Roman numerals there.
Exactly. And all it is, in today's language, laying down heads is the language I used back in the day. But today we would call it outlining or bullet points or talking points. And if you do a media interview, you write down your talking points. No matter what you're asked, you bring it back to the talking points. And they did the same thing when they wrote down sermons. They didn't write down the whole thing and dictate the whole text. They just had bullet points, and they kind of riffed off and ad-libbed off the bullet points.
And I know exactly what that's like now in a more secular kind of way.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So they were doing, they were smart, and they were doing the same thing back in the day. And this is the basic, I think within the first 5 minutes of learning how to be a Christian minister, you would learn about laying down heads.
When I'm doing closing argument, I know my case backward and forward. I should know it backward and forward before I get to trial. Hopefully I know it pretty well before I file charges if I'm the prosecutor. But even as a defense attorney, right? You know the case backward and forward. You get to closing argument. You don't write out every freaking word. I just hit the high points. I just jot down a few notes, and I go from those notes, and then I can go for an hour off a handful of notes.
Oh, easy. Yeah. And, when I come out with a book, I do the media interviews, and I'm doing the same thing with my talking points, where I can fill up a 20-minute episode or whatever time is allotted off 4 talking points.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, when you compare the Book of Mormon to the New Testament or to the Bible, there is a huge difference. And one of the things about the New Testament is that it is very dense. It is very compact in its writing style. The Book of Mormon is the opposite of dense. It is what would be the opposite of dense?
Lucid, I guess.
It's very loose. It's repetitive. Yeah. And it takes a lot more time to say things and a lot more space to say things than the New Testament would say in a much shorter and more direct way, which is another indication of the dictation being used for the Book of Mormon production, as opposed to what it might look like if someone took the time to sit down and think about it and write it out. which is more like the New Testament.
Right. And always keeping in mind the Book of Mormon was dictated, it was not written.
Expansive.
Yeah.
It's the word I was trying to think of. As opposed to dense, it's more expansive in its presentation, I think.
That's a better word, yeah. So the next slide, laying down heads, says, excuse me, this was in the Dartmouth era. And the quote is, and it took the opportunity to discourse them on the head, appealed to them as my witnesses. Well, back then they spoke differently, but this is the concept. And by the way, Ebenezer Wheelock was the president of Dartmouth College that collaborated with Dr. John Smith, who we talked about earlier, in developing the curriculum at Dartmouth. So I found a direct reference to laying down heads directly in Dartmouth College early curriculum.
Okay, so he discoursed them on the head, or gave them an opportunity to discourse them on the head, which is, you're saying, talking about this particular, whatever this head was, this note, this bullet point.
Yeah. And again, you don't have to believe me. There's a citation and people can go look it up, so that when the Mormon apologists come after me, note that they don't have any evidence to back them up, and I do. But anyway, moving on.
Okay.
So, and by the way, again, there was a lot of different terms for the same concept of laying down heads. Samson Occam was an American Indian student. He was intellectually gifted. We have, again, never heard the name, at least I never did, in Mormon discussions or Sunday school classes, but he was educated at Dartmouth College on this topic, and then he went and started teaching all over the place, all around New England, and he has numerous references to this concept. You want to just read what's in highlights, but these are different terms for laying down heads.
Yeah, let me try this here. So in early American preaching, what later writers call laying down heads was also described with several near synonyms, mostly words for dividing a sermon into stated points in order. Yeah, like you say, it's a very common practice that we do. We just don't call it laying down heads anymore. Particulars is one of those expressions that we find. These four particulars shall endeavor to represent. Okay, so particulars. Improvement is it so as we have heard. Numbered method. And there's an example. In a carnal warfare, there's a regular method to be taken. 1, there must be a regular enlistment. 2, 3. So there's a listing of things from this source. Mm-hmm. Distinguish. I shall endeavor to represent 2 sorts of people and distinguish them one from the other. That doesn't sound like the Book of Mormon. To be observed. It is greatly to be observed that Christianity is compared almost to every temporal concern of man. So giving these sort of synonyms or near synonyms to this idea of laying down heads before it was called laying down heads. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. So we're getting into the weeds a little bit of the curriculum at Dartmouth and places related to Dartmouth. But this is the general concept. This was no secret. This was mainstream curriculum right there. And Dartmouth was doing the same thing that Yale and Harvard and the other Ivy Leagues were doing. So
yeah, we wouldn't think that it's just exclusive to Dartmouth.
Not at all. Not at all. Okay, so this is again a picture of the chapel right across the street from Dartmouth Hall, Church of Christ, same name that Joseph Smith used to start his movement.
You keep saying that. Do you think there's a connection?
Yeah, I think there's a direct plagiarism, but that's just me, But I think it's more than a coincidence. And this is going inside, and this is interesting. This is a historical site because not only is it associated with with Dartmouth, but Hiram Smith sat in those pews listening to our favorite Dr. Roswell Shurtleff giving sermons, which we're about to take a look at. Let's get into it. So the next slide, this is AI again generated, but the sermons were riddled with chiasmus. And there were benefits to doing that because it made it more poetic. It made more, it had more punch. It was, the repetition is the mother of all learning. So it had that feature, and it also doubled your content. You only had to really write half a sermon and then repeat it back in reverse order, and you doubled the length of your sermon. It was very efficient.
You know something? I would tell this to people when I was teaching back when I was active in the church and teaching gospel doctrine class, and it was 2006. And it's the Old Testament, and we're getting to Isaiah, and everybody knows two things as Mormons. Number one, I hate Isaiah, and number two, I'm supposed to love Isaiah because I'm a Mormon, and the Book of Mormon says such good things about Isaiah. So what I told everybody says, look, here's the first thing. Everybody says it's 66 chapters. It's a long book. What you have to understand is almost everything in Isaiah is a parallelism, either regular parallelism or inverted parallelism, i.e. chiasmus, which means that for almost all of the book of Isaiah, he is saying the same thing twice. Yeah. So really, it's only about half as long as you think it is. And for whatever reason, that seemed to help some people not be so concerned about Isaiah and get into what it is he has to say without worrying about not understanding it.
Yeah. Well said. So the next slide shows us some of the sources that Hiram Smith would have been picking up on, because these are the prominent ministers in the colonial days. And this is just one slide, but there's like for Adam Clark talked about, well, there's an Adam Clark commentary, which BYU has shown, it was borrowed upon for the Joseph Smith translation. That upsets some people.
Colby Townsend, Colby with a C on this one, not to be confused with Colby Reddish, which I always confuse it with. Colby Townsend has written a paper also demonstrating that Joseph Smith used the Adam Clark Bible commentary in composing the Book of Mormon before he got to the JST. Yeah.
And Adam Clark, and let's agree that Colby Reddish is the real way to spell Colby, but and Colby's better all the way around.
And Colby Reddish is with a K. Colby Townsend was with a C.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just saying Colby Reddish has it right. So let's agree on that. But yeah, Adam Clark, he also talked about the word of wisdom type of concepts. I mean, I don't want to go through this whole slide, but my point of this slide is that there are all these ministers, John Calvin, Thomas Campbell, the Campbellites, which was another restoration movement, Jonathan Edwards, Emanuel Swedenborg is where we get the idea for the 3 degrees of glory, the celestial kingdom, eternal marriage. That's all Emanuel Swedenborg. Joseph Smith didn't come up with these ideas. This is all content presented and in the conversations at Dartmouth College and certainly Moor Academy.
Joseph Smith comes to the table with a somewhat unique combination of food items, but that's because he's coming directly from a buffet, which has every possible food in the world available to put on your plate.
Yeah. And this goes back to my point earlier that Joseph Smith was exposed to these concepts. I'm not saying they were fully developed. I'm not saying they didn't come from anywhere else or he didn't learn about them later in Palmyra, but they were certainly available in the Dartmouth community where he lived for a number of years.
Very good.
Anyway, so the next slide is simply, again, reiterating the first thing with producing the Book of Mormon is to have a lot of content. And the Dartmouth was just ideal because it had the American folk religion. It had mainstream Christianity, as we just saw. It had the Greek mythology. It had the Islamic polygamy. And, here's a new prophet. Here's new scripture. And it had the Masonic temple rituals, all within. It was like Walmart. You went there and you could buy anything. There was this very heavy duty, fascinating conversation going on in the community right where he lived.
It's like a university community or a college town.
Kind of like that, or maybe exactly like that. So now it gets even extra fun because this is how Joseph Smith came up with chiasmus very directly. Again, you could condense this down to 60 seconds. You start with a small piece of parchment, a small piece of paper, and then the next slide shows where you simply make a list. And ideally, and the next slide shows how that list kind of builds. You build and build and build, and you make your final point, which is the next point, where that's kind of the gradation of the concepts coming down. And then boom, the next slide shows you make your key point. That's laying down heads. That's it in a nutshell. Are you with me?
Yeah, and this could take an hour or two to get through.
Easy.
Because you're extrapolating and riffing off of each of these points as you get to them and making your own impromptu, although well conceived and educated, and you studied stuff before this, right? So you have stuff to say, your own mini sermons on each of these heads as you go down to your main point at the bottom.
Yeah, exactly. And it can be on a tiny little piece of paper, and you can have, like on this one, I have, well, you couldn't write this small with a pen, but you could have you could have 15 points in a tiny little parchment.
As long as it's small enough to fit at the bottom of a hat. That's all I'm concerned about.
Easily, it would fit in the bottom of a hat. So the next slide is the dead giveaway, and the next slide is here it is in a nutshell. You go down, you lay down your heads, you make your key point, which goes by different names: key point, your turn, or your center. Again, we're seeing that there's lots of terminology, but you see all of these.
But
and all you do,
the turning point, which you call the center, is at the very bottom of this list.
Yeah, very bottom of the list. You make your key point or your center or your turn, whatever you want to call it. And then all you do is simply go up in reverse order. And you can use the same words. You can use synonyms. You can use antonyms, or you can just paraphrase and riff off of it. There's no rule. So there it is. That is the formula for creating a chiasmus. And even though when it's diagrammed, it looks very structured and very impressive, and it is impressive. It's designed to be impressive, but it's also remarkably simple and easy to do.
So when you're writing it out to give a sermon or to dictate, you don't have to write out the whole chiasmus. You don't have to write all the lines or the ideas coming into the center point and then write all the ideas coming out and matching them up as we see John Welch and others do. I used to do this as well. When we're diagramming chiasmus in the Book of Mormon or elsewhere, you just need that first list from the top to the middle. And once you've done that, then you just go backward from the middle to the top, and that creates the other half of the chiasmus.
Bingo. And you've just doubled up on content. Big benefit. So this is the bomb. When I did this research, but it's going to get even better. I'm going to bring some more evidence to the table, but this is a simple concept: laying down heads, making your key point, and turning and going. And you're right. You don't have to rewrite anything in reverse order. You just simply go from, instead of going top to bottom, you go from bottom to top, and you've got yourself a chiasmus.
I feel like this is a brilliant idea. How did you come up with it, Randy?
It was just being immersed in this Dartmouth stuff. And I knew about laying down heads. And by the way, I want to give some credit to William Davis, who wrote Visions of Searstone.
Mm-hmm.
I've been reading through this, and he talks a lot about laying down heads. So this is not, again, I never want to take credit for other people's work. You know, it's between Richard Behrens, immersed in the Dartmouth stuff, and Visions of the Sunstone. And then I made a little, laying down heads. I said, well, this is easy. You just make your point and then go back up the list, and boom, it just snapped into my head. Boom, it's easy.
Well, it's really interesting because it does look easy, and you're the first one to come up with this, to my knowledge. I've never heard this before.
Yeah, no, it's new stuff. And so the next slide is, I think I heard this saying from you. You want to read it?
Well, tell the audience what you're going to say it, then tell them what you've said. This is what that says Dale Carnegie, probably from his public speaking book. But this is what attorneys are supposed to do. They're taught this all the time in closing argument, because you tell the jury 3 times. You tell them what you're going to say, then you tell them, and then you tell them what you said.
Yeah.
Because you're doing it orally. This isn't a book that they get to take back with them into the jury room. They have to remember what it is you said. And one of the commonly understood ways of getting people to understand what you said and remember it is to repeat it. Because repetition is the key to learning. Repetition is the key to learning. Repetition is the key to learning. What is repetition the key to, Randy?
I think it's the key to learning. You know, I'll tell you a funny story. I was in Boy Scouts and I went off to this little lesson on how to pack your backpack for campouts. And the guy said, remember this, Scouts. He was in the front of all of us. And he goes, remember this, Scouts. Never, 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 never forget to put all your like items in plastic bags. And I thought, well, that was obnoxious. So I went back to my, the scoutmaster and the troop and everything. And I said, I just saw the most obnoxious guy. And he said, don't ever or always never forget, never, never. And I kind of repeated it. And my scoutmaster says something I'll never forget. He goes, well, you didn't forget, did you? And here I am talking about it 50 years later. So yeah, repetition is very powerful.
And this is just a way of repeating. I don't want to say just a way. This is a way, this chiasmus is a way of repeating things in a way that isn't so obvious as never, 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 never.
Yeah. This is it. It's just so simple. You don't need college degrees. You don't need any education. You can literally explain this by going, excuse me, right to this slide and explain it in under 60 seconds. It looks so complex, and yet the idea behind it is so simple.
This is great. I'm so glad you're sharing this on my show for the first time.
Yeah, me too. I'm loving it. So the next slide.
Now I moved this forward and it added this thing called an overview on the side.
Oh, right. Okay. Do you want to go through the overview? Because that's kind of the main thing. Then I'm going to kind of show it in motion. But you want to go through the key points?
The overview of this is it's advanced knowledge, and you put it in quotation marks because it's not really advanced knowledge. It's very simple to do.
Yeah.
Compelling rhetorical method, check. Easy and versatile ABBA concept, check. Except A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, and then reversed on this.
Yeah.
Terminology, not necessary. You don't have to call it a chiasmus. It was taught in the Dartmouth classroom. It was preached in the Dartmouth chapel. It effectively doubles the content of the sermon or text.
Yeah. So we're back to our buddy Roswell Shirtliff. And I got this idea. Let's take his sermons. There's advanced AI technology now where you can do word frequency analysis and word analyses and see if he's using chiasmus and laying down heads in the actual sermons Hiram Smith actually attended. And you know what? There are, I think, over 30 sermons we're able to find. We transcribed them. We put them through the software. And every single sermon has multiple chiasmus. And I have 3 examples I'm going to show quickly. But here it is, where you have the character of God, his physical perfection. A total of, we found 9 chiasmus in this one sermon alone. And, going through it is kind of tedious. But to paraphrase it, you can see the actual words, they're bolded where they occur, and then you see the reverse order, and you can see the structure to the right where it goes A, B, C, and then C prime, B prime, A prime in reverse. And you see this pattern in multiple times in every one of his sermons.
So you got two texts there and bolded, and on the right you have the structure delineated.
Yeah. And by the way, there are total, and this is just two, but there were actually 9 chiasmus in this one sermon.
Oh, these are both from the same sermon, and you say there's 7 more.
Yes.
I see. It's a sermon that was given March 14th, 1812 on the character of God, his physical perfection.
Yeah.
Sounds like
And
something
Hiram
we might
Smith
encounter in the lectures on faith.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's another example from Reverend Roswell on January 24th, 2018. Here we found a total of 7 chiasmus, and here's the actual text from 2 of them to demonstrate the concept. And, people that are interested can take a screenshot and check it out. And, the archives are there. It's easy to see. So in other words, it was not only being taught in the classroom across the street. And by the way, Reverend Roswell taught across the street as well. He was teaching laying down heads and rhetorical preaching techniques. And then he'd go across the street and preach a sermon and actually put it into action. And if you were paying attention in class, you would see it over and over again. And according again to Richard Behrens, Hiram Smith went to over 1,000 of these types of sermons.
Was he giving a sermon every day?
Twice a day.
Can you imagine? I think that most pastors in regular Christian churches who preach every Sunday, they've got enough on their plate coming up with a new sermon every Sunday. This guy's doing not just 1 a day, but 2 a day.
Yeah. And the way they did it, because it seems superhuman, but the way they did it was actually very sensible. They would have sermon. You remember, Roswell and the other pastors were there well before that. Well, they would share notes, and they would have notes, and they didn't teach the sermon once and discard it. They would teach it once, and then there was a wave of students every 4 years, and they'd teach them again and again. And they would teach the other guy's sermons, and all they were doing is going down, laying down the heads, and then paraphrasing as they went back up to the top. That's all they're doing.
It's very interesting what they were doing, and I'm glad that you've uncovered all of this.
Yeah, no, it was profoundly brilliant, but brilliance is oftentimes, depicted by its simplicity.
No human being could preach that many sermons in that short of time.
Yeah, and no farm boy could dictate a 530-page book, but here you go.
Exactly. Now, here's another example of another sermon.
Third example, people can take a screenshot, check out what I say. Don't believe a word I say. Here it is. Check it out yourself.
Is all of this new research going to be included in an upcoming volume written by you, Dr. Bell?
Writing a book is so much time. I'm about to release a book, and I've worked on it for years. That's all I can commit to. But, I did make a promise to our friends that are in this space that I would keep coming up and revealing, or revealing is probably a bad word, showing what I could find out of the Dartmouth information I'm sorting through. And here I'm trying to make good on my promise. I've had a delay because I had some health issues earlier, but this is good stuff, and it kind of builds on what Richard Behrens came up with.
But this is uniquely yours, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, this is, yeah. I mean, I gotta kind of, you're right. I think what I did initially was I was just parroting Richard Behrens. I think I made that amply clear. This is new stuff. This has never been seen by anyone ever before. And the connection has never been made before. And for better, for worse, I own it. Okay.
So here's 2 more sample texts from
and I mean, I own it in terms I own up to the fact this is my stuff, but people can use it. I'm not claiming exclusive ownership.
Well, you are copywriting it, aren't you?
Well, that I am, but
There you go.
but you get my point. I think
Okay.
I'm sharing is what I'm happy to share this stuff.
Got it. And we're glad you are.
Thank you. So here are the key findings. It's wrap up time. Dartmouth makes a direct connection between chiasmus and Hiram Smith, who lived down the street. So our next slide, this is AI generated. I don't stand by its accuracy, but this makes the point that the Smith family went from Dartmouth College to Palmyra, a mile away from the Erie Canal. They literally lived at one place or the other. They're at the information highways. They were not in the sticks. They were not rural farmers. They were plugged right into the cutting edge intellectual resources.
Yeah, I sent you a text about this AI map saying, were there really 4 cities named Rome and 2 named Utica between Dartmouth and Palmyra?
Yeah. Thank you, Chat GPT, but I still think it makes the point.
Chat GPT really likes the name Rome.
It really does. Okay, so this is kind of fun. Believe it or not, this is from my Mormon missionary. I went on a mission to England, and this is pictures of my flip chart, because back in the day we didn't have iPads to scroll through, and we had to memorize these discussions.
I'm surprised you didn't have flannel boards.
We didn't ever. They
That
were
was the
out
generation
there.
Before us. Was the flannel board.
We went high tech with the flip charts.
Yes, we were so glad to be out of those flannel boards and into the flip charts.
Yeah. But here's the flip chart showing Joseph Smith with his fingers literally on the gold plates, writing the Book of Mormon. This is what we taught to investigators. Yes. And here it is in the actual words we had to memorize. Joseph Smith translated the record from gold plates. This was the official Mormon missionary narrative that I personally taught in the late 1970s and early 1980s.
Yes. Didn't we all? You know, Colby Reddish should have taught with a flannel board. That would have been apropos, don't you think?
Oh, well, Colby owns flannel. He's quite the capable spokesman. Yeah. So, and then here's just, it was all over the church. Here you see Joseph Smith reading off the Book of Mormon, dictating, sometimes with a curtain, sometimes not. This was what was taught back in the day.
I don't even see a hat in any of these pictures.
Well, we're about to get there. So if we go again.
Much less a rock.
By the way, before we get there, this is the wooden box with the next slide. This is actually in the Mormon Church History Museum that shows the gold plates in the actual, quote, wood box that Joseph Smith kept the real gold plates in. The problem is if you build the gold plates in the dimensions that Joseph Smith described with the rings, that lid doesn't close. So
yeah, I remember Brent Metcalf had pointed that out to me. That was the first time I understood the problem. And I don't know what the solution is, but that is the actual box. So maybe if they closed it, you know, gold is quite malleable. So maybe they just pushed it down a little bit and squashed those D rings.
Something, you know, actually who came up with, I was standing there with Rebecca Biblioteca and Landon Brophy, and Landon's the one that made that observation. I want to give credit to him. Okay. So guess what? Here I thought I belonged to the one true church. Okay. And yet I'm learning truth from, of all places, South Park, all in an episode called All About Mormons, Rockin' a Hat, season 7, episode 3 in 2003. I never heard this rockin' a hat thing. And if I did, it was in the context of it being an anti-Mormon lie. And so when this South Park episode came out, it's like, what? This is just a bunch of garbage. Well, what do you know?
It's South Park. You don't expect them to be historically accurate.
You would think not, but it turns out, guess who was telling me the truth? South Park or my own church, the winner goes to South Park.
That can sting a little.
Yeah. Ouch. So here they're changing the story. On the left, you see the old narrative of Joseph Smith reading off the plates. And in the right, you see Joseph Smith with his head in a hat. This, it's no wonder the church hid this so effectively and for so long, because frankly, it's just so silly, but they did. And for good reason. And what's really been interesting, I'm not a psychologist, is to see how they started at this very sheepishly because they are forced into the light on the topic. And now they're like, well, yeah, it was like a cell phone. And yeah, it's, and they're trying to normalize it, and they're trying to make the members, you feel compelled to normalize it. I'm sorry, it's still ridiculous.
Yeah, South Park may have contributed to the church having to be more forthcoming on this, as well as the internet.
Absolutely.
Wait,
and here's
Russell
Nelson in this infamous shot where he didn't have the excuse me, he didn't have the resolve to just put it right up to his face. But I'm sorry, I hate to make the comparison, but talking about pulling a rabbit out of a hat, Joseph Smith pulled a religion out of a hat.
And it was this white top hat, which may have been translucent a bit on the inside. This is a picture of what Joseph Smith would have looked like if he'd lived to be in his 90s.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, good point. Oh, and by the way, okay, so yeah, go ahead into the next slide. It's quite conceivable, and I got this idea from, of all places, Radio Free Mormon on one of your episodes, where the idea was, hey, this is a magic trick. The rock is a prop, the hat's a prop. The real secret was a little piece of parchment in the bottom of the hat. That's certainly a very viable explanation, but all you need is that little piece of parchment out of the bottom of the hat, and there you see it depicted how you could easily create a long chiasmus narrative off that little piece of parchment.
Very interesting. He could have memorized it. He could have written it out. I mean, he's having to do it every day. So this is something where a little prompt would be of immense help, I would think, to a person in Joseph's position.
Yeah, and it's a very tiny piece of paper. It would be easy to drop in there. I like you, I don't know if he memorized it or some days used a little piece of parchment. We don't know. But
if I were doing that trick, I would put it in the hat with the stone. I would have it palmed with the hand that has the stone in it, and then put the stone in the hat and leave the parchment.
Exactly. You reach in your pocket, you pick up the stone and your little piece of parchment and drop it in the hat, and the person taking the dictation doesn't have a clue that you're reading off an outline. Be easy.
Well, here's the mention in the Book of Mormon.
You're the one that told me about this. Why don't you share about this?
Well, and I learned it from William Davis's book, where apparently in the Book of Mormon, Jacob, the author Jacob, the Nephite Jacob, mentions this idea about heads in the Book of Mormon. In Jacob chapter 1, verse 4, we find the following: and if there were preaching, which was sacred, or revelation, which was great, or prophesying, that I should. Now, this is what Jacob's saying is the instruction he received from his brother Nephi, if I'm remembering correctly, that I should engraven the heads of them upon these plates and touch upon them as much as it were possible for Christ's sake and for the sake of our people. So there's very, I think, explicitly the idea of putting bullet points or main points down and calling them heads in the Book of Mormon itself.
Right. And honestly, this is my own personal opinion. I don't have evidence, but I think that likely Joseph Smith flubbed up and put this language in, but he was very familiar with laying down heads.
Or he may have felt that just because it's part of his culture, it would be part of the Nephite culture, kind of like cows, horses, oxen, and goats and pigs.
Good point. Could be that way too. We'll never know. But clearly, this laying down heads reference doesn't make sense in the context of the Nephites. So it's a giveaway that he knows the concept.
Right. I think that William Davis even mentions the possibility, that as the Book of Mormon as we have it today, every chapter has its own little italicized synopsis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are not represented as being part of the gold plates. Okay. That was not part of the original text of the Book of Mormon that was added later. But almost every book in the Book of Mormon, there's an exception. I think it's Mosiah, which is meaningful. But almost every book in the Book of Mormon has its own italicized heading, which is a synopsis of what's going to happen in the chapter, right? And it may be more detailed, it may be less detailed. Those synopses are represented as being part of the original text of the Book of Mormon. And in many cases, those end up looking a lot like heads. In other words, this is what this book is going to be about. Here are the heads of it. And now I'm going to riff on that and expand upon it and create an entire book based on it.
Yeah. And you know who is an expert on that is John Lundwell. He deserves a lot of honorable mention because he knows that extraordinarily well. And also, I think Ron Jorgensen, and there are others that are up to speed on that. But the mysteries, are turning out not to be so mysterious.
Well,
okay,
the more we learn / I learn about the early 19th century in New York and surrounding environs, the more I understand the Book of Mormon.
Oh, absolutely. For sure.
It is definitely, I don't know that any other book can be more clearly stated to be a product of its environment.
Well said. Yeah. So Chiasmus explained. Do you want to go through those 4 points?
Yes. Number one, laying down heads in the Dartmouth curriculum. 2, rhetorical skills in the Dartmouth curriculum. 3, chiasmus in Dartmouth sermons contemporaneous with Hiram Smith. And number 4, both heads and chiasmus are in the Book of Mormon itself.
Yeah. So, again, my personal opinion, to me, the explanation that resonates most directly, most logically, the most rational explanation is laying down heads was in the Dartmouth curriculum. The rhetorical skills were in the Dartmouth curriculum. Hiram Smith was at Dartmouth. Chiasmus is in the Dartmouth sermons. I've proven that through the word analysis of Reverend Roswell. And both heads and chiasmus are in the Book of Mormon itself. So it can't be more
connections, Randy,
than that.
That's a lot of connections. That's like a pretty thorough, intricate spider web of connections.
Yeah, and without closed circuit TV to watch what was going on for the time frame, I think it's as of a solid connection as you can possibly hope for. All right, so just a couple more slides. The Book of Mormon content, and now this is me. This is just my opinion. Take it or leave it. The Book of Mormon has a total of 530 pages, and you go, well, how could this uneducated farm boy produce this? Well, if you start with 530 pages, first of all, Isaiah takes up about 65 pages. And, really you're left scratching your head wondering why it's there because it's already in the Bible with slight variations. But that's, in my mind, is kind of filler. The New Testament, paraphrases or direct quotations of the New Testament takes about 100 pages. This is kind of fun. And it came to pass, that phrase occurs, I forget how many hundreds of times in the Book of Mormon. That takes up 15 pages. And then the war stories, with a few exceptions, were not particularly inspirational. They were just kind of like a little boy talking about G.I. Joe stories, but the war stories I never found particularly inspirational. But there's about 150 pages of the war stories in the Book of Mormon. That nets out about 100 or about 200 pages of material. And with the chiasmus effect.
Wait. Doesn't that total 330 pages and leave 200 pages to be accounted for?
Yeah, I think you said it better than I did. Yeah.
Because you got 100, 150, which is 3. That's 250 already. Then you've got 3:15 with Isaiah and 3:30 with it came to pass. Yeah.
Yeah, I have little minus signs. So you're right. The math is that leaves you with 200 pages. With the chiasmus effect, all you need to do is come up with 100 pages of bullet points and then go back up to double it. So really, Joseph Smith, in terms of original thinking and original thoughts, and the avalanche of content he had available to him, had to come up with about 100 pages of bullet points, and double it for the 200 pages. I don't know that I would put that formula into the category of impossible or miraculous. I think it was Joseph Smith was quite capable of doing that.
Yeah, especially when you consider that at least one of his main sermons in the Book of Mormon gets repeated not long after. So there are some sermons in the Book of Mormon that are sui generis to the Book of Mormon, like 2 Nephi chapter 2, opposition in all things. You're not going to find that sermon repeated later on. But there are other sermons, like I think Moroni chapter 7, which may get repeated as recently as Moroni 10, talking about gifts of the Spirit and how critical it is that you have those gifts of the Spirit. And that's a sign of the people who have the true church. Because if you don't have the gifts of the Spirit, you don't have faith. And if you don't have faith, you can't be saved.
There you go. Okay, so the next slide. There's the grand answer, 100 pages. When you have time to do that, that's not a problem. So the next slide. Here's, in my mind, the formula for creating the Book of Mormon. This is simplified, but you start with laying down heads, the bullet points, which we've covered, the rhetorical methods, which certainly include what we today call chiasmus, simple concept you could explain in 60 seconds. You have voluminous content that came not just from Dartmouth, but from other sermons, Emanuel Swedenborg and others in Palmyra. You have Joseph Smith, which, according to his mother, had the gift of storytelling, and he could tell war stories for hours at night and entertain the family for hours with his stories of the ancient inhabitants of the Americas and war stories.
If he had only had a scribe present when he's telling all of these stories to his family to write down every word of what he's saying, that would be a book in the Book of Mormon alone.
Yes, but at minimum, it was certainly an opportunity to rehearse.
Yes.
And then you have a dictated narrative, zero translation, zero writing. The only person doing the writing is the scribe. But Joseph Smith was a gifted orator, clearly, and that wouldn't have been a problem. Now then, you have 5 to 17 years of preparation. Counting from either the time Joseph Smith left Dartmouth in 1817, or from the time that Moroni started supposedly showing up in 1823. Take your pick. He had 5 to 17 years to marinate and have these little pieces of parchment, or he might have been of the. I've met people that can memorize and have this remarkable retention. Like, I know this one guy who can remember perfect lines from a movie he watched in 1972. Oh, wait, that's you. So,
see, and guys like that find it amusing that other people think that they're that good when the guy actually knows he's not that good. But it's impression, it's perception. Perception is reality, and Joseph Smith was able to get people to think things about him which were not necessarily real.
Exactly. But I'm still impressed. And then finally, you got 60 or 90 days of dictation. So yeah, the Mormon apologists say that over a period of 60 to 90 days, Joseph Smith could dictate it. Well, do the math, ask ChatGPT. That's 25 to 60 minutes a day. And with this repeating back and forth and everything else, I mean, you could start in the morning and be done by lunch with the dictation process to reach 530 pages. So you have the Book of Mormon being dictated at 6 to 9 pages a day. It's writing a book or dictating a book is an accomplishment. and I certainly respect that. But 6 to 9 pages a day, dictated, with 5 to 17 years of preparation, I think there's a completely sensible, rational explanation how this could be produced by a guy who's been incorrectly labeled a frontier, uneducated farm boy.
Yeah. This is amazing. This is fantastic. I think we're just about, okay, so the next slide has those.
Yeah,
circled in red.
Circled, and just making my final point. And then the next slide is the last slide.
Drum roll, please.
Possible sources for a chiasmus. Now, frankly, I've already said this, but because I know it's going to be forgotten, I want to reiterate it.
Okay, because we have seen this slide before.
We have seen this slide before. It's here again on purpose. There are numerous ways Joseph Smith could have come up with chiasmus. The school teachers in the family, he was smart enough to observe it in the King James Bible. The guys in London that published about it before the Book of Mormon was written, observed in sermons, because, these pastors were obviously trained in it and doing it all the time. Natural speaking patterns. And all I've hoped to accomplish here is I've added another very viable, in my mind, the most viable explanation, and that is the Dartmouth connection, because it was directly taught in the classroom Hiram attended, and deliberately and directly exemplified in the sermons he attended. Mystery solved in my mind.
Well, I am very interested and enthusiastic about this new theory of yours and the evidence you've put forward to establish it. This is something new in the Mormon studies space. I'll be very interested in hearing what the viewers have to say about this in the live chat, as well as in the comment section, and what other people say about it going forward. And I'm most enthused about the fact that you came on to Radio Free Mormon to talk about this for the first time publicly.
I appreciate you having me. It's fun. I don't make a dime doing this. It's kind of a sideline. Believe it or not, I do have a life and I do have other interests. But, it's just, I look at Mormonism as a really impressive magic trick. And I've seen enough to know that it's not miraculous. God, the God of Genesis 1:1 had nothing to do with it. And, but that still leaves you with the question, okay, how was this done? And I think the collaborations and the efforts of a lot of people, inadvertently, even faithful members like Richard Behrens, have helped solve the mystery of how this magic trick was pulled off.
Wow. Well, thank you so much again, Randy. I appreciate it. By the way, out there, please hit like, please hit subscribe on this so you don't miss any of these other great interviews that we have coming up. And heaven forbid you might have missed this if you didn't have it subscribed, but please hit the like, please hit the subscribe. Thank you to all the donors who have gone to radiofreemormon.org and made a donation. If you haven't done that, please consider doing so today and support this work. Your donations literally keep Radio Free Mormon broadcasting behind enemy lines. So thanks again, Randy. Any closing comments you want to make before I sign off the air?
Yeah, one last one. Along the lines of this magic trick idea, and I know that if I have a deck of cards and I want you to have the 7 of diamonds, you're going to get the 7. You're going to think you have free choice, but you're going to get the 7 of diamonds. But what people don't realize that are in the weird world of magic, there's 5 or 6 ways to force a 7 of diamonds. So did Joseph Smith do the trick this way or that way or that way? There's numerous ways the same magic trick can be done. This is another one I'm bringing to the table, but I fully want to acknowledge there are other ways to pull the trick off.
Okay, so that's the third time I've heard those caveats, and I appreciate the fact that you are repeating that, because that has been something that has been misunderstood in the past, and hopefully it will not be misunderstood by anybody after this particular podcast.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody, thanks again for watching. Please join us next time for another amazing and fascinating episode of Radio Free Mormon. This is Radio Free Mormon signing off the air.